December 19th, 1940, rations are shrinking, temperatures are below freezing, and at the heart of an empire that once controlled a quarter of the earth, a single number is flashing red on a confidential treasury report, cash on hand, almost zero. The world remembers this winter as the season of dogfights over London, of RAF Spitfires clawing the sky, of Churchill's speeches echoing, "We shall never surrender." What almost no one saw was the quiet, invisible collapse happening in the ledgers. On maps, the British Empire still looked invincible. Pink ink covered continents: India, Canada, Australia, Africa, the Caribbean, shipping lanes stretching like arteries across the oceans. But under Whitehall, in airless concrete rooms lined with maps and telephones, the men running the war are staring at a different battlefield. Columns of numbers, gold reserves, dollar balances, debts to American arms manufacturers. And those numbers are telling them something Churchill has spent his entire life trying to postpone. The greatest creditor empire in modern history is about to go bankrupt. Down in the cabinet war rooms, under layers of steel and concrete, Churchill sits alone at his desk. Above him, London flickers under German bombs. Around him, the machinery of empire hums and clanks. Staff officers, typists, messengers. All of it funded by a financial system that is now running on fumes. He reaches for a pen and begins to write a letter, not to a general, not to a king, to another politician across an ocean. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President of the United States, leader of the richest neutral country on earth. Churchill can command armies and navies with a sentence. He can move divisions with a phone call, but what he needs right now is something no British leader has ever had to beg for: credit. For over a century, London has been the world's bank. City gentlemen's clubs and merchant houses financed railroads in Argentina, mines in Africa, factories in America. Sterling was the currency of empire. Gold flowed through the city like blood through a heart. Now, in the second year of the most mechanized war in history, the empire that used to collect interest is the one asking for a loan. The letter Churchill drafts that night is not a stirring speech. It's not meant for radio. It is, in cold economic terms, a confession. Britain can still field soldiers. Britain can still build planes. Britain can still promise to fight on the beaches. But Britain can no longer pay its bills. To understand how an empire that minted global finance ended up pawning its future for survival, you have to leave the romance of battlefield maps and walk into the brutal arithmetic of total war. On September 3rd, 1939, when Britain declared war on Nazi Germany, it was still a financial superpower. The Bank of England held billions of dollars worth of gold. British investors owned foreign railways, oil fields, plantations, insurance houses. The City of London dominated marine insurance and shipping finance. If global capitalism had a capital city, it was London. But the war Hitler launched was not the kind of war British finance was built for. This was not a gentleman's conflict over colonies. It was industrial slaughter. Tanks, trucks, bombers, radar, submarines, steel by the million tons. Oil by the barrel, rubber for tires, aluminum for aircraft. And Britain had a structural weakness it could not talk away with rhetoric. It imported almost everything it needed to survive: food, fuel, raw materials. In peacetime, that dependence was manageable. In wartime, with German U-boats hunting convoys and the European continent closed, it became a slow-motion death sentence. So the empire turned west, towards the only place on Earth that could supply war material at industrial scale: the United States. But America, in 1939, was not eager to save anyone. Memories of the First World War were still raw. Families remembered sons buried in French mud. The word Europe meant blood, not gratitude. Congress had passed neutrality acts to keep the United States out of foreign wars. Buried inside those laws was a simple, devastating clause: cash and carry. If Britain wanted American weapons, American trucks, American aviation fuel, the rules were clear: pay in cash, no loans, no IOUs, and carry it on your own ships. The U.S. would happily sell. But the crates did not move off New York docks until gold or dollars landed on the table. For the first year of the war, Britain played by those rules. Gold bars were quietly removed from Bank of England vaults. Foreign securities were sold. Dollar balances were drained. Then, in a secret operation codenamed Operation Fish, Britain did something no imperial ledger had ever imagined. It physically exported its wealth. Battleships and fast liners left British ports loaded not with troops, but with metal, cases of gold bullion, bundles of negotiable securities, the accumulated savings of an empire. Destination: Canada. Purpose: collateral. It was the largest single movement of financial wealth in human history, not because Britain wanted to diversify, because it needed something even the empire could not manufacture with gunpowder and steel: American dollars. Those dollars were wired to American manufacturers, to aircraft plants in California, to shipyards in New York, to munitions factories in the Midwest. One by one, the reserves disappeared into invoices. By late 1940, the truth was impossible to ignore, even on carefully sanitized treasury printouts. The gold was gone. The liquid dollar balances were gone. The British Purchasing Commission in Washington had contracts ready, machines waiting to be built, and no legal way to sign. Because at the bottom of every order was a question: how will you pay? And the answer, for the first time in centuries, was: we can't. When Roosevelt opens Churchill's letter, he already knows part of this story. His advisors have been tracking British reserves for months. The math is simple enough for anyone with a calculator and access to customs data. At current burn rates, Britain will run out of money before it runs out of enemies. If Britain falls, Roosevelt understands, the Atlantic is next. The shield between Hitler and the Western Hemisphere disappears. American isolation becomes an illusion. But political reality inside the United States is as hard as Midwestern winter soil. The law forbids gifts. Voters are hostile to foreign entanglements. Congressmen are not going to tell farmers in Iowa and factory workers in Ohio that their tax dollars are going to bail out an empire that still technically controls India. So Roosevelt has to do something subtle. He has to change the financial architecture of the war without calling it that. Publicly, he offers a metaphor. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't stand there and negotiate the price of a garden hose. You lend him the hose. He gives it back when the flames are out. It's folksy, warm, reassuring. But in the rooms where the real documents are drafted, the conversation doesn't sound like neighborly charity. It sounds like risk management. Behind the image of a helpful neighbor lies a harder logic. If America is going to put its balance sheet on the line, it wants collateral, not in the form of a mortgage on a house, but on something larger, on an empire. Inside the U.S. Treasury, the man enforcing that logic is Henry Morgenthau Jr. He is not a soldier. He is not a diplomat. He is something far more dangerous to a bankrupt nation: a meticulous, uncompromising accountant. To Morgenthau, Britain is not a wounded ally holding back fascism. It is a client on the verge of default, sitting across the table asking for an extension it hasn't earned. If the American taxpayer is going to underwrite Britain's survival, he insists, then Britain must first prove that every scrap of wealth, not just government wealth, but the private wealth of its elites, has been fully exhausted. He demands an audit, not of one ministry, of an entire empire. Every factory, every mine, every railway stake, every foreign subsidiary, every financial asset held by British citizens anywhere on the planet. The British delegation, led by Sir Frederick Phillips, is stunned. This is not wartime cooperation. This is bankruptcy supervision. Phillips tries to explain the obvious. Britain has already sold its gold. It has already offloaded many of its best securities. To liquidate long-term industrial assets during a global conflict will yield pennies on the dollar. To Morgenthau, that is not a problem. That is the point. If Britain wants dollar liquidity, it must pay the price the market assigns to desperation. And desperation discounts everything. One of the first targets is a company almost unknown to the public but critically important to British finances: American Viscose, a giant in the synthetic fiber industry, the largest rayon producer in the United States, owned outright by a British parent company. Highly profitable, strategically located, a river of dollar dividends flowing into British accounts. In normal times, a firm like this is a fortress of long-term value. In wartime, when the owner is at the mercy of a creditor nation, it becomes hostage collateral. Morgenthau insists, sell it. London resists. They know its value is easily over $100 million, but the Americans know something more important. Britain has no alternatives. So, under political and financial siege, the British government moves in. On a quiet Sunday morning in March 1941, they execute an emergency seizure order under wartime powers. American Viscose is not sold in a competitive auction. It is sold in a distress sale to American bankers who understand exactly how weak Britain's position is. Sale price, roughly $54 million, half of its estimated value. The dollars flow straight into the U.S. Treasury, where they will be used to pay American arms manufacturers for weapons Britain cannot afford. For many in the British elite, this is the moment the mythology of the special relationship cracks. They are not partners. They are a customer on credit, being forced to liquidate the family silver to keep the lights on. And the liquidation is not limited to finance. It spreads to geopolitics. Britain's navy is collapsing under the strain of German U-boat warfare. Merchant ships are disappearing beneath Atlantic waves faster than British yards can replace them. The lifeline to North America is fraying. Churchill needs destroyers, dozens of them, immediately. He asks Roosevelt for 50 old ones, World War I relics that have been rusting in American yards. Roosevelt agrees, but nothing is free. In exchange, the United States wants something no enemy has ever taken by force: permanent basing rights on British territory. A string of naval and air bases from Newfoundland to the Caribbean. A 99-year lease, effectively ownership across multiple future generations. For 50 old ships that barely function, Britain signs, not because the deal is good, but because survival does not allow pride. This is how empires fall now, not from invasion, but from cash flow insolvency. By March 1941, when the Lend-Lease Act finally passes, Britain is functionally stripped clean. The gold is gone. The securities are gone. The U.S. industrial assets are being sold at fire sale prices. The overseas bases are leased to another power. The British treasury is empty. But Lend-Lease, though presented as generosity, contains something darker in the fine print. A clause, Article 7, written in dense diplomatic language that conceals its strategic aim. It requires Britain, after the war, to dismantle its imperial preference system. To the average citizen, this sounds benign. In economic reality, it is a wrecking ball aimed at the empire's industrial foundation. Imperial preference is the glue of the British economic system. It ensures that British goods are cheaper inside the empire's markets than American ones. It keeps capital circulating within the imperial orbit. By agreeing to dismantle it, Britain is agreeing to open its empire to American exporters, effectively signing away the last mechanism protecting London's industrial base. But in 1941, with Luftwaffe bombs falling and U-boats closing the Atlantic, nobody in London has the leverage to refuse. They sign, and history will later record that signature as the moment Britain traded its future for its present. When America enters the war after Pearl Harbor, the material imbalance only grows. British factories are converted entirely to war production. Exports vanish. Traditional markets in Asia, Latin America, and Africa lose their British suppliers. And who steps into those markets? American companies with better financing, larger factories, and a domestic economy untouched by bombs. Britain fights, America fights, and sells. By 1944, the shift is complete. The global center of gravity has moved from London to Washington. 2/3 of the world's gold is now in Fort Knox. The world's largest industrial machine is American. And the old empire is running on borrowed money, borrowed ships, borrowed food, borrowed fuel. Britain wins the war militarily, but the cost of that victory is waiting like a shadow just off stage. The final blow comes not from Germany, but from the ally that saved them. August 15, 1945. Japan surrenders. World War II ends. 7 days later, just 7, President Truman signs a cold bureaucratic order. Lend-Lease is terminated immediately. Ships in the Atlantic carrying food to Britain are ordered to turn around. No transition period, no soft landing, no gratitude. Just a switch flipped in Washington, with consequences London will feel for decades. John Maynard Keynes, exhausted, ill, and arguably the greatest economic mind of the century, is sent to America to negotiate the survival of his nation. He asks for a grant, a thank you, a recognition of sacrifice. The Americans offer a loan, with conditions designed not to help Britain recover, but to ensure the pound never again threatens the supremacy of the dollar. And Keynes, with a failing heart, signs what he calls a financial Munich. The pound is forced into convertibility. Sterling holders worldwide immediately dump it for dollars. Britain hemorrhages reserves. Factories stall. Imports collapse. And the empire's last illusion of financial independence evaporates in 5 weeks. Britain, the empire that once financed continents, has become a regional power begging for credit. And from this vacuum, the United States steps in. Doctrines, bases, global strategy. The new hegemon is here. By the winter of 1947, the price of victory finally reaches the British public. Snow buries the railways, coal freezes in storage, the electrical grid collapses. Bread, never rationed even under the worst U-boat sieges, becomes rationed in peacetime. Factories sit idle not because there are no workers, but because there is no fuel, no dollars, no reserves. 2 years after defeating Hitler, Britain's standard of living falls below wartime levels. The empire that once promised Victorian immigrants streets paved with gold now struggles to keep its lights on. And the worst is yet to come. July 15th, 1947. In compliance with the American loan agreement, the pound sterling is made fully convertible. It is a moment Keynes had feared more than any air raid. The window opens, and instantly, like water rushing through a cracked dam, the world unloads pounds for dollars. India, Egypt, Australia, colonial governments, British firms operating abroad. For years, they had been forced to accumulate sterling they could not convert. Now, with a single legal stroke, they can. And they do. In 5 weeks, Britain loses hundreds of millions of dollars. The reserves that were supposed to last years vanish in a panic-driven stampede. The Treasury slams the convertibility window shut. The policy is dead. The damage is permanent. The humiliation is total. A single financial experiment, forced upon Britain as a condition of survival, has shattered the post-war recovery before it even began. And, in the vacuum left behind, another transformation begins. The empire starts to melt away. The moment world power changed hands, February 21st, 1947. A telegram leaves the British Foreign Office. Its tone is cold, stripped of rhetoric, and brutally honest. It informs the United States that Britain can no longer afford to support Greece and Turkey, two nations on the front lines of Soviet expansion. For a century, Britain had been the guardian of the Eastern Mediterranean, blocking Russia's access to warm water ports. Now, with the treasury empty and the domestic economy in collapse, London admits the unthinkable. We can no longer maintain our responsibilities. You must take over. In Washington, this message is not just a diplomatic update. It is a starting gun. Within weeks, President Truman announces a new doctrine, the Truman Doctrine. For the first time in history, the United States formally assumes the role of global guardian, stepping into geopolitical shoes Britain can no longer fill. Historians mark this moment, February 1947, not merely as a policy shift, but as the day the baton of world leadership passed from London to Washington, not through conquest, not through treaty, but through insolvency. The slow extinguishing of an empire. Britain's economic crisis continues into 1948 and 1949. With reserves low, export capacity crippled, and global demand shifting toward American industry, the British government is forced to take another step that would have been unthinkable before the war. A massive devaluation of the pound sterling, from $4.86 before the war to $2.80 in 1949. A 30% overnight collapse in national purchasing power. Imported goods, food, fuel, machinery become painfully expensive. The British working class, who endured 6 years of bombs and rationing, now face austerity without war. Meanwhile, the empire's political fabric stretches thinner. India is gone. Palestine unravels. The Middle East moves into crisis. The colonies, once administration centers of profit, become liabilities Britain cannot afford to administer or defend. Even the symbolic pillars of imperial identity begin to crack. The Royal Navy, the pride of centuries, faces budget cuts so severe that entire fleets are mothballed. By 1950, the empire still exists on paper. In financial reality, it is a house mortgaged to another nation. And the mortgage payments last a lifetime. The bill comes due for 6 decades. The Anglo-American Loan Agreement of 1946, negotiated by a dying Keynes, is not a grant of gratitude. It is a commercial loan, with interest, with annual payments. For 60 years, through recessions, oil shocks, Thatcherism, globalization, and the rise of the European Union, Britain sends a check to the United States Treasury. Year after year, government after government, generation after generation. The final payment clears on December 29, 2006. 60 years after the victory parades. 60 years after Churchill stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. 60 years after the world cheered the defeat of fascism. The British taxpayer is still paying the bill for survival. And the lesson is unmistakable. In total war, there are no true winners. There are only those who lose everything, and those who lose slightly less. Germany was bombed to ruins. Japan was burned to ash. Britain was bankrupted. Only one nation exits the war richer, stronger, and more powerful than when it entered. The United States. Its economy doubles. Its factories flood the world with goods. Its gold reserves surpass those of every other nation combined. Its currency becomes the backbone of global finance. And through Lend-Lease and the liquidation of British assets, America quietly acquires something no empire has ever seized so elegantly. A global order, markets, bases, shipping lanes, credit dominance, monetary supremacy. All purchased, not conquered, with distressed assets from a collapsing ally. The hidden truth behind the price of victory. When Churchill wrote to Roosevelt in December 1940, he saved Britain from immediate collapse. But he also signed the deed that liquidated the empire. He made the only choice available to a nation surrounded by enemies and running out of time. The world sees the moral triumph. Britain stood against tyranny. Britain refused to surrender. Britain fought for civilization. The balance sheet tells a colder truth. Britain sold its future to buy its present. The empire did not fall on a battlefield. It did not fall to rebellion or invasion. It fell in account books, in loan agreements, in clauses written in neutral diplomatic language, in forced asset sales and currency conditions. It fell one piece at a time to pay the bill for doing the right thing. And the nation that bought those pieces now runs the world system Britain once built. Cinematic ending. Global rewind signature. History remembers battles, not balance sheets. Flags falling, not currencies breaking. Armies marching, not accountants tallying reserves. But the real pivot of power in the 20th century was not fought on a beach or in the sky. It was fought in ledgers, in loan offices, in the cold rooms of treasuries. Empires rarely die with explosions. Most die with signatures. And in the winter of 1940, the British Empire signed away the century that would follow, not because it wanted to, because it had no alternative. And the world that rose from its ashes still lives under the financial architecture built in that moment, when one empire fought for survival and another bought the future. I'm John, and this is Global Rewind. The past is not dead. It is the blueprint of the world we live in. When you're ready for the next episode, I'll be here.